Welcome, preaching students of the Expositors Academy, to this Explainer. As part of our intertextuality series, today we're looking at the features of prophetic fulfillment. Think of this as us constructing the ultimate blueprint for your hermeneutical tool belt. You see, as future expositors of God's Word, you're going to constantly face the task of explaining exactly how the New Testament uses the Old Testament. It's a massive privilege for sure, but it requires precision. So we're going to lock down the exact features of prophetic fulfillment so you can get up there and preach with absolute confidence.
Okay, let's dive right into Section 1, the half-built house. Imagine a guy who hires a contractor to build his family's absolute dream house.
Months pass by, right? And the guy finally visits the site. What does he find? Half-painted walls, a missing roof, and a literal gaping hole where the master bathroom is supposed to be. Obviously, the guy is furious. He tells the contractor, "You promised to fulfill your commitment." But the contractor just smiles and says, "Sir, I did fulfill it. I hammered until the handle broke, I mixed cement until the mixer died, and I chased away the stray dogs. Surely that counts as fulfillment." Now to you, as future expositors, this sounds totally ridiculous. A broken hammer and half-painted walls do not equal a fulfilled commitment. But listen, just as differing definitions of the word fulfillment cause incredibly costly construction mistakes, they also cause incredibly costly theological errors in the pulpit.
And that brings us to the absolutely critical question we have to ask. What does it really mean to fulfill? Misunderstanding how the Old Testament is fulfilled in the New Testament leads straight to a half-built theology. If we confuse our terms, we just end up confusing our congregations.
To make sure that never happens, we are going to master 5 specific features of prophetic fulfillment. Our roadmap today will take us through the half-built house, the prophetic mountain range, language and loose quotations, meaning versus significance, corporate solidarity, and finally, building solid theology. All right, let's get to work.
Moving right along to Section 2, the prophetic mountain range. Now, what's genuinely fascinating about this next concept is how the prophets actually experienced time when they were receiving revelation from God.
We call this the near/far view of prophecy, or sometimes you'll hear it called prophetic telescoping. Basically, God chose to reveal future events to the prophets without showing them the valleys of time that sat between those events. It's like looking at a massive mountain range. When you look at it from a distance, you can clearly see the nearest peaks and the farthest peaks, and honestly, they look like they're sitting right next to each other. But what you completely miss from that angle are the massive, hidden valleys stretching out for miles between those mountains.
And this brilliantly illustrates how we should read certain biblical texts. Notice the stark contrast here in Zechariah. In chapter 9, verse 9, we have a prophecy beautifully fulfilled at the triumphal entry during Christ's first coming. But look at the very next verse. Zechariah 9:10 speaks of the Messiah bringing peace to the nations and ruling the world, an event that firmly awaits the future second coming. 2 verses sitting right next to each other, yet they're actually separated by a valley of at least 2,000 years of unrevealed time.
And you know who recognized this valley of time perfectly? Jesus himself. When he read Isaiah 61 in the synagogue, as recorded in Luke 4, he literally stopped mid-sentence. He proclaimed the favorable year of the Lord, rolled up the scroll, and just sat down. Why? Because the very next phrase was about the day of vengeance, which belongs exclusively to his second coming. The prophet saw both peaks, but Jesus knew exactly which peak he was currently standing on.
This brings us to Section 3, language and loose quotations. As preaching students, you already know the actual words you preach matter immensely, and that's especially true for the word fulfill itself.
We often just assume that every time the New Testament uses the word fulfill, it's a technical term meaning a direct prophecy has just come true. But check this out. The data totally shatters that assumption. Out of the 86 total times the word fulfill is used in the New Testament, only about 25 of those are in a prophetic context. The vast majority of the time, 61 instances to be exact, it simply means to complete or fill up, like being filled with joy or a certain number of days passing.
What this means for us is that context completely dictates meaning. Whether you're preaching James 2, where Abraham's actions fulfilled or proved what was said about him in Genesis, or Romans 13, where loving your neighbor fulfills the law, you've got to let the immediate context be the foundation of your exegesis. Fulfill is a flexible word, guys, and your interpretation absolutely must be anchored in the surrounding text.
Furthermore, you're going to notice pretty quickly that New Testament authors don't always quote the Old Testament word for word. Now, does that mean the Bible has errors? Absolutely not. As MacArthur and Mayhew point out, the oldest Greek manuscripts did not contain punctuation marks.
A loose quotation still accurately conveys the sense in the reference text. I want to reassure you, as future pastors, that the biblical writers utilizing loose but incredibly faithful quotations does not violate biblical integrity. It simply conveys the true sense of the text to their readers.
So the crucial point here is setting strict interpretive boundaries for your congregation. Let's look at Section 4, Meaning versus Significance.
Now, these two terms are closely related, but as expositors, you absolutely must know the difference. Meaning refers to the authorial intent. It's singular, it's fixed, and it is the unmovable foundation of the house. Significance, on the other hand, is the application or the implication. It flows out of that timeless truth, and there can be multiple significances. Think of significance as the many different colors you could use to paint the house, as long as you stay on the original foundation.
Always remember, the meaning of a text sets the strict boundaries for its significance. You can't just apply a text to whatever you want. For example, when Matthew 2:15 quotes Hosea 11:1 saying, "Out of Egypt I called my son," Matthew isn't claiming Hosea was making a direct prediction about the Messiah's childhood. The meaning in Hosea was historically about the nation of Israel. Rather, Matthew is pointing out the profound significance of Jesus' life perfectly mirroring Israel's history. He's making a theological point, not claiming a direct prophetic fulfillment.
Okay, let's move to Section 5, Corporate Solidarity. This final conceptual tool really builds our understanding of Jesus as the ultimate representative.
The tool is called corporate solidarity. We define it as a biblical concept where a group of people is so intimately identified with one person that the individual acts on behalf of the many. I really want you to grasp this. What is true of the individual representative in these cases genuinely becomes true of the entire group they represent.
A crystal clear example of corporate solidarity in action is found right in Romans chapters 5 and 6. Adam was the representative whose single action brought the fall to all his people. Conversely, Christ is the ultimate representative, whose single righteous action brought salvation and justification to all his people. When the representative acts, the whole group is profoundly affected.
This exact principle also unlocks how Jesus relates to Israel. If you look at Isaiah 41, the nation of Israel is repeatedly called God's servant. But just one chapter later, in Isaiah 42, the title My Servant is applied directly to Jesus, the perfect, ultimate Israelite. Because of corporate solidarity, Jesus steps into the role that the nation of Israel entirely failed to fulfill. He acts on behalf of the nation, which allows New Testament writers to apply Old Testament passages about Israel directly to Christ. It's just a stunning, beautiful theological reality.
And that brings us to Section 6, Building Solid Theology. Let's trace all of this back to that parable of the contractor we started with.
Preaching students, this right here is your screenshot moment. Whenever you're tasked with preaching the New Testament's use of the Old Testament, rely heavily on this summarized tool belt. Remember the near-far view in those hidden valleys of time. Remember that fulfill doesn't always mean a prophecy just happened. Remember that loose quotations are completely faithful to the text. Keep a strict boundary between foundational meaning and the flowing colors of significance, and leverage the beautiful truth of corporate solidarity to show Christ as our perfect representative.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this passionate challenge. Every single time you step into that pulpit to exposit the word, you are a builder. If you confuse effort with completion or meaningless significance, you do your people a major disservice. So I have to ask you, will your exposition leave your congregation with a structurally secure, beautifully finished house, or a half-built theology? Study hard, use these tools accurately, and go build something that lasts for eternity. Keep learning, keep preaching the word, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.